You planting corn and beans in the middle of nowhere while my wife and I get the $2 million penthouse? All fair and square, right, Mom?" The sound of Patrick's laughter echoed down the courthouse hallway. Olivia, my daughter-in-law, covered her mouth, pretending to hide her chuckle, but her eyes glittered with pure mockery. Their lawyer, Robert Mitchell, a man in an impeccable charcoal suit, smiled smugly as he reviewed his documents. They were so sure of their victory, they didn't even try to hide their contempt. I clutched my old handbag to my chest, feeling the humiliation burn my cheeks. Other lawyers passing by turned to look, some with curiosity, some with pity. I could feel their eyes on me, this simple farm woman in her only good dress, being laughed at by her own son. But I kept my head high, because in less than an hour, when Judge William Hayes announced his ruling, those smiles were going to disappear from their faces, and not even their expensive lawyer could do anything to stop it. My name is Karen Brown. I am 63 years old, and my hands are marked by a lifetime of working the land. Every callus, every wrinkle, every scar tells the story of a woman who never had anything handed to her. I've spent my whole life in the country, planting corn and beans on the 15 acres I inherited from my parents in rural Tennessee. I am not a city woman. I don't understand fancy high-rises or expensive restaurants. My world has always been the sunrise over the fields, the smell of damp earth after rain, hands dirty with honest work. And I was never ashamed of it, until my own son started to feel ashamed of me. I was widowed 25 years ago. My husband, Thomas, died in a tractor accident when Patrick was just 13. I still remember that day like it was yesterday. The sheriff's deputy at my door. The words that didn't make sense. The way Patrick's face crumpled when I told him his daddy was gone. From that day on, my only reason for living was to give my son everything I never had. I worked cleaning houses in town, getting up at 4 in the morning to be there by 6. I scrubbed toilets and mopped floors for families who barely looked me in the eye. I came home smelling of bleach and other people's dirt, but I never complained. I sold half the land my parents left me to pay for Patrick's private school. The Wilson Academy, they called it. A place where rich kids went, where Patrick could get the education that would open doors I never even knew existed. I skipped meals to buy him new clothes so he wouldn't look different from the other children. I walked 4 miles each way to save on bus fare and give him money for his textbooks. I mended my own dresses so many times they were more patches than original fabric. I never complained. I never made him feel the weight of those sacrifices. Watching Patrick grow up healthy, educated, with opportunities I could only dream of, that was my greatest joy. Every time he brought home a good grade, every time he smiled with pride, I knew it was worth it. Every single sacrifice was worth it. And I succeeded. My son graduated with honors from the University of Tennessee. He landed an excellent job at a financial firm in Nashville. He started making more money in a month than I had ever seen in a year. He met Olivia at some company event. She was a corporate lawyer from what he called a good family. When he brought her home to meet me for the first time, she looked around my little farmhouse like she was visiting a zoo exhibit. But I didn't say anything. My son was happy. That was all that mattered. They got married in an elegant ceremony at a country club I couldn't even afford to eat lunch at. I showed up in my only good dress, a cream-colored one I'd bought at the thrift store, and altered myself. I felt completely out of place among all those important people in their designer outfits. Olivia's mother looked at me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. But I just smiled and hugged my son and told him I was proud of him. Because I was. Lord knows I was so proud. That was all that mattered. Or so I thought, because little by little, something changed. The visits became less frequent. Used to be Patrick would drive down every other weekend, sometimes bringing Olivia, sometimes just by himself. We'd sit on the porch and drink sweet tea, and he'd tell me about his job, his dreams, his plans. Then it was once a month, then every other month. Then the phone calls got shorter, 5 minutes instead of 30. "Sorry, Mom, got a meeting." "Can't talk long, Mom, Olivia needs me." "I'll call you back, Mom." But he never did. The excuses became more elaborate. Work was busy. Olivia had social obligations. The drive was too long. Traffic was terrible. And when they did come to visit, it wasn't to see me. It was to talk about the land. The land. That small property in the middle of the Tennessee countryside my parents left me. 15 acres of fertile soil where I grew my vegetables, my corn, my beans, my home, my livelihood, my legacy. To me, that land was sacred. Every tree had been planted by my father's hands. Every furrow had been opened by my own. My mother was buried under the old oak tree near the creek, right next to my father and my husband Thomas. But to Patrick and Olivia, it was just a business opportunity. They started with subtle suggestions. "Mom, you're getting too old to work so hard. Mom, that property is so lonely, so far from everything. Mom, you should come live with us in the city. We could find you a nice little apartment." I gently refused their offers. This was my place. Here were my memories, my peace, my life. The thought of leaving made my chest tight, but the suggestions turned into pressure, and the pressure turned into demands. One day, about 8 months ago, they showed up unannounced. I was out in the garden when I heard a car pull up. 2 cars, actually. Patrick's sleek black sedan and another vehicle I didn't recognize. Olivia stepped out wearing heels that immediately sank into my dirt driveway. She made a face like she'd stepped in something foul. Patrick got out looking uncomfortable, not meeting my eyes. And from the other car came a man in a suit carrying a briefcase. "Who's this?" I asked, wiping my hands on my apron. "He's an appraiser, Mom," Patrick said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We just want to know what your property is worth. For your peace of mind." For my peace of mind. I said nothing. I just watched as they walked around my property, the appraiser making notes, taking pictures, measuring things. Olivia stayed by the car, refusing to get her expensive shoes any dirtier. They came inside. The appraiser spent 20 minutes reviewing my property deeds, asking questions about the well, the septic system, the boundaries. Patrick answered most of them. I didn't even know he knew that much about my land. They stayed for dinner because it would have been rude not to invite them. I made my chicken and dumplings, the recipe my mother taught me. Patrick used to love it when he was a boy. But the conversation wasn't like before. No questions about my health. No asking about my garden or my church friends or whether my arthritis was acting up. They only talked about the land, about how much it would be worth if I sold it, about developers buying up everything in the county, about how well off I'd be in a comfortable nursing home where I wouldn't have to worry about a thing. I listened in silence, feeling something break inside my chest. The appraiser's report arrived 2 weeks later. Patrick called to tell me the news, excitement barely contained in his voice. The land was worth $5 million. $5 million. Apparently, the area was seeing major development. A new highway was being built 10 miles away. Tech companies were moving into the region. Developers were buying up farmland left and right, paying premium prices. My little patch of countryside had turned into a gold mine, and Patrick and Olivia knew it. The visits multiplied after that, but they no longer came alone. They brought lawyers, they brought documents, they brought folders full of papers covered in words I didn't understand. "It's better for tax purposes, Mom. This way we avoid probate problems later. Besides, you don't really need 15 acres anymore, do you?" Every time I refused, their faces hardened a little more. The smiles became more forced, the goodbyes colder. Until one day, Patrick lost his patience. We were standing in my kitchen. Olivia was in the living room, pretending to look at old family photos, but really just texting on her phone. Patrick had just shown me another set of documents, something about a living trust that would transfer the property to him for safekeeping. "I'm not signing anything, Patrick," I said for the 3rd time. "This land is my home. I'm not giving it away." His face went red. Something ugly flashed in his eyes. "You're selfish," he said. His voice was low at first, then rose to a yell. "I gave you everything. I sacrificed my time, my money, my life for you, and this is how you repay me? By holding on to a piece of land you don't even know how to use?" I stepped back, stunned. My son had never spoken to me like that. Never. Olivia appeared in the doorway, putting her hand on Patrick's shoulder, calming him with that soft voice she used when she wanted to manipulate. "What Patrick means to say, Karen, is that we could do so much with that property. Develop it. Make it productive. Create something meaningful." She paused, looking at me with those cold eyes. "While you just plant corn and beans." She said it like it was something shameful, like my whole life of honest work was something to be embarrassed about. My hands were shaking, but I looked my son straight in the eye. "I think you should leave now." They left. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. They didn't come back, not until the court summons arrived. The legal document came on a Tuesday morning, October 15th. I remember because it was my mother's birthday. The mailman, old Henry, who'd been delivering mail on this route for 30 years, handed me the envelope with a look of pity I will never forget, like he already knew what was inside. My hands trembled as I opened it. The words seemed to swim before my eyes. Petition for legal guardianship. Mentally incompetent to manage assets. Risk of financial loss due to diminished capacity. Petitioner, Patrick Thomas Brown. My own son was declaring me incompetent. He was treating me as if I were a senile old woman who couldn't take care of herself. As if my 63 years of life, of work, of sacrifice, meant nothing. I sat down in my old rocking chair, the one Thomas made for me when I was pregnant with Patrick, and I cried. I cried for hours. I cried for the boy I raised, for the man he had become, for the mother I was, who apparently wasn't good enough anymore. But when my tears finally dried, something else grew inside me. It wasn't sadness. It was determination. That evening I was going through old boxes in the spare room, looking for my property documents, when I found something unexpected. Tucked behind my mother's old photo albums was a letter. It must have fallen there years ago and been forgotten. The envelope was addressed to Patrick, but it had never been sent. The return address said Olivia Reed, Olivia's maiden name. I hesitated. Reading someone else's mail felt wrong, but something told me to open it. The letter was dated 6 years ago, early in Patrick and Olivia's relationship, and what I read changed everything I thought I knew about my daughter-in-law. "My dearest Patrick," it began, "there's something I need to tell you, something I've never told anyone. I wasn't born Olivia Reed from a wealthy Atlanta family. My real name was Olive Mae Jenkins, and I grew up on a dirt-poor farm in rural Alabama. My daddy was a sharecropper. My mama cleaned houses just to put food on the table." I stopped reading. My heart was pounding. I worked my way through college cleaning offices at night. I changed my name, made up a family history, erased every trace of where I came from, because I swore I would never go back to being that dirty farm girl everyone looked down on. When I see your mother, Karen, I see everything I ran away from. I see the poverty, the dirt, the shame, and I hate it. I hate that it reminds me of who I really am. I'll do whatever it takes to stay where I am now. Whatever it takes. The letter was never finished, never sent. Maybe Olivia had second thoughts. Maybe she decided the secret was too dangerous to share, even with the man she would marry. I sat there for a long time, holding that letter. Olivia wasn't evil. She was terrified. Terrified of becoming me. Her cruelty wasn't just greed. It was self-hatred, projected outward at the woman who reminded her of everything she was running from. It didn't excuse what she was doing. Nothing could excuse that. But it changed how I saw her. I put the letter away carefully. I didn't know if I would ever use it, but I knew it was important. And I knew one thing for certain. I was not going to let them take my land. I was not going to let them destroy my dignity. Tomorrow, I would go to town and find a lawyer, someone who would listen, someone who would help me fight, because Karen Brown might be a simple farm woman who planted corn and beans, but Karen Brown was nobody's fool. I went to town the very next morning. I put on my second-best dress, a navy blue one with small white flowers that I usually saved for Sunday church, and drove my old pickup truck the 12 miles into Millbrook. Millbrook wasn't much of a town, a few thousand people, a main street with a hardware store, a diner, a bank, and a handful of small offices. But it was the county seat, which meant it had lawyers. The first 2 offices I walked into turned me away before I could even finish explaining my situation. The first lawyer, a heavy-set man with a bow tie, told me he didn't handle family disputes. The second one, a woman with sharp eyes and sharper fingernails, said her retainer was $5,000 up front. When I told her I didn't have that kind of money, she looked at me like I was wasting her time and told her secretary to show me out. I was starting to lose hope when I saw a small sign in a window on the corner of Main and Oak Street. Emily Carter, attorney at law, free initial consultation. The office was tiny, just one room with a desk, 2 chairs, a bookshelf stuffed with law books, and a wilting plant on the windowsill. The woman behind the desk couldn't have been more than 30 years old. She had kind brown eyes and hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "Can I help you?" she asked, standing up. "I need a lawyer," I said. "But I should tell you up front, I don't have much money." She smiled and gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Why don't you sit down and tell me what's going on? We can figure out the money part later." So I sat down and I told her everything. I told her about Thomas dying and raising Patrick alone, about selling the land and skipping meals and walking miles to save bus fare, about Patrick's success in his marriage to Olivia, about the visits that became demands, about the appraiser and the $5 million, about the documents they wanted me to sign, about Patrick calling me selfish in my own kitchen. And I told her about the court summons, about my own son declaring me mentally incompetent. Emily listened without interrupting. She took notes in a small notebook, her pen moving quickly across the pages. When I finally finished, my throat was dry and my hands were shaking. She closed her notebook and looked me straight in the eye. "Mrs. Brown, Karen, this isn't just a property dispute." "What do you mean?" "What your son and daughter-in-law are doing. This is elder abuse. They're using the legal system as a weapon to steal what's rightfully yours." She leaned forward, her voice firm. "But we're going to fight this, and we're going to win." For the first time in weeks, I felt something loosen in my chest. "You really think we can beat them? They have money. They have fancy lawyers. Patrick said their attorney is one of the best in Nashville." Emily smiled, but there was steel in it. "I've gone up against the best before. They're not as scary as they look, trust me." She paused. "I'm not going to lie to you, Karen. This won't be easy. They have resources we don't. But they also have weaknesses they don't know about yet." "What kind of weaknesses?" "The kind we're going to find." She stood up and extended her hand. "So what do you say? Are you ready to fight for your home?" I took her hand and shook it firmly. "I've been fighting my whole life," I said. "I'm not about to stop now." The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork and legal jargon. Emily filed a response to Patrick's petition, denying all allegations of mental incompetence. She requested copies of every document they had submitted: the medical reports, the witness statements, the psychological evaluation. What we found made my blood boil. The medical report was signed by a doctor, Gregory Palmer, a psychiatrist in Nashville. According to the document, he had conducted a thorough evaluation and concluded that I showed signs consistent with early-stage cognitive decline. "I've never met this man in my life," I told Emily, staring at the paper. "I've never even been to Nashville." Emily nodded grimly. "I figured as much. Look at this." She pointed to a line at the bottom of the report. "Evaluation based on detailed interviews with close family members." He never examined you, Karen. He wrote this report based entirely on what Patrick and Olivia told him. Can he do that? Technically, in certain circumstances, yes, but it's highly questionable, especially when used to support a guardianship petition. We'll challenge it. Then there were the witness statements. Dorothy Wallace, my neighbor whose property bordered mine on the east side, had submitted a signed statement claiming she had seen me wandering the fields at odd hours, talking to myself, and appearing confused and disoriented. I read it 3 times, each time feeling angrier. Dorothy Wallace had been jealous of my land for 40 years. Her husband had tried to buy my father's property back in the 1970s, and my father had refused. She'd held a grudge against my family ever since. I wasn't talking to myself, I told Emily. I sing hymns while I work. I've done it my whole life. My mother used to do the same thing. Emily made a note. And the odd hours? I get up early. Always have. I'm usually in the garden by 5 in the morning during summer. Is that a crime now? The second witness statement was from James Cooper, who owned the general store on the edge of town. He claimed I had come into his store multiple times appearing disoriented and had difficulty counting change and remembering what items I came to purchase. That one hurt more than Dorothy's lies because I had known James for 20 years. His wife and I had been in the same quilting circle before she passed. James Cooper's store was about to go under last year, Emily said, reading my expression. Patrick probably offered him money he couldn't refuse. How much? Enough to matter to a man about to lose his business. I shook my head slowly. I thought I knew these people. Money makes strangers of everyone, Karen. But don't worry. We'll expose these statements for what they are. Bought and paid for testimony. The first hearing was scheduled, then postponed when Patrick's side filed a motion for additional time to gather evidence. Then it was rescheduled, then postponed again for procedural issues. Emily warned me this was a common tactic. They wanted to drag things out, wear me down, make me spend what little money I had on legal fees until I gave up. But I wasn't giving up. I went home every night to my little farmhouse and worked my land like I always had. The corn was coming in nicely. The beans were climbing their poles. Life went on, even when everything else felt like it was falling apart. And then Emily found something that changed everything. It was a Thursday afternoon when she called me. "Karen, I need you to come to my office, right now if you can." I could hear something different in her voice. Excitement, barely contained. I drove to town faster than I should have, my old truck rattling over the potholes. When I walked into Emily's office, she was standing at her desk with papers spread out everywhere, her eyes bright. "Sit down," she said. "You need to see this." She handed me a stack of documents. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Mortgage papers, bank statements, legal agreements. "This is the mortgage for Patrick and Olivia's penthouse in Nashville," Emily explained. "The $2 million condo they're so proud of. I did some digging into their finances." "How did you get these?" "Public records mostly, and a few favors from colleagues." She pointed to a section highlighted in yellow. "Look at this. They're 3 months behind on their mortgage payments. The bank has already sent 2 warning letters. They're about to go into foreclosure." I stared at the numbers. 3 months behind, on a property worth $2 million. "But Patrick makes good money. He told me—" "Patrick makes decent money," Emily corrected. "But Olivia's law firm downsized last year, and she took a significant pay cut. Meanwhile, they've been living way beyond their means. Credit card debt, car payments, club memberships, vacations they couldn't afford. They're drowning, Karen." It was starting to make sense. The sudden urgency about my land, the pressure that turned to demands, the lawsuit. They needed money, desperately. But Emily wasn't finished. "There's more." She pulled out another document and handed it to me. "This is the mortgage agreement. Look at the cosigner." I looked at the page where her finger pointed, and my heart stopped. There was my name, Karen Louise Brown, listed as cosigner on the mortgage, and below it, my signature. Except it wasn't my signature. I had never signed this document. I had never agreed to co-sign anything. I didn't even know this mortgage existed until this moment. "I didn't sign this," I whispered. "Emily, I swear to God, I never signed this." "I know you didn't." Emily's voice was calm but fierce. "Olivia forged your signature. She used her legal knowledge to add you as a co-signer without your consent. That's why they're so desperate to get control of your assets. If they default on this mortgage, the bank can come after you." I felt dizzy. My own daughter-in-law had committed fraud, had stolen my identity, had put me on the hook for a $2 million debt I knew nothing about. "Can we prove it?" I asked. Emily smiled. "We're going to. I've already contacted a forensic handwriting expert. We'll compare your real signature with the one on this document. If there are differences, and I'm confident there will be, we'll have proof of forgery." I sat back in my chair, my mind reeling. Everything was falling into place now. This wasn't just about greed. This was about survival. Patrick and Olivia weren't trying to steal my land because they wanted to be rich. They were trying to steal it because they were about to lose everything. But Emily warned me that the forgery evidence alone might not be enough. "We need to prove intent," she explained. "We need to show this wasn't just an isolated incident, but part of a deliberate plan to defraud you. For that, we need more." That night I sat in my kitchen thinking about everything that had happened over the past year. The visits, the phone calls, the pressure, the arguments. And then I remembered. The phone. 2 years ago, Patrick had given me a cell phone for Christmas. A smartphone, he called it, though I never figured out what was so smart about it. He said it was so we could communicate better. Video calls and text messages and all that modern nonsense. I barely knew how to use the thing. I could answer calls and make calls, and that was about it. But about 6 months ago, my neighbor's grandson, a sweet boy named Tyler who helped me with yard work sometimes, had shown me how to record phone calls. Just in case you need to remember something someone said, he'd explained, showing me which buttons to press. My grandma does it all the time. I had started recording my calls with Patrick and Olivia, not because I suspected anything, not because I was trying to gather evidence. I did it because their legal jargon confused me. They would talk about trusts and transfers and tax implications, and my head would spin. I wanted to be able to listen again later, slowly, so I could understand what they were really saying. I never imagined those recordings would become my salvation. I dug through my drawer and found the phone. The battery was almost dead, but I plugged it in and waited. When it finally turned on, I went to the voice recorder app, my fingers trembling. There were 37 recordings, 37 conversations over the past 6 months. Every time Patrick or Olivia had called to pressure me about the land, every argument, every demand, every threat disguised as concern. I called Emily first thing the next morning. We spent the entire weekend listening to those recordings in Emily's small office. Some of them were routine, Patrick asking about my health, Olivia making small talk about the weather. But others were damning. In one recording from 3 months ago, I had stepped away to use the bathroom, leaving the phone on the kitchen counter. I could hear Olivia and Patrick talking in the background, thinking I couldn't hear. Olivia's voice was sharp and impatient. "Once we have power of attorney, we'll put your mother in a cheap nursing home and sell everything. With $5 million, we can pay off the mortgage, buy another penthouse in a better neighborhood, and still have plenty left over to invest." There was a pause. Then Patrick's voice, cold and matter-of-fact. "My mother already lived her life. Now it's our turn to enjoy." I had to stop the recording. My hands were shaking too hard to hold the phone. Emily put her hand on my shoulder. "I know this is hard to hear. My own son," I whispered. "Saying I've already lived my life, like I'm just waiting to die. He's not the boy you raised anymore, Karen. Somewhere along the way, he became someone else. But this recording, this is exactly what we need." There was more. Another recording caught Patrick on the phone with someone else, Robert Mitchell, their lawyer. Patrick didn't know I had accidentally answered and was listening. "Robert, I need you to find a legal way to declare my mother incompetent. I don't care how. Make up testimonies. Get a doctor who will sign whatever is necessary. I'll pay you whatever you ask, but I need that land now." Robert's voice came through, hesitant. "Patrick, that's ethically questionable." "Don't give me ethics. Do you want this case or not? Because I have other lawyers waiting." A long sigh. Then, "All right, I'll see what I can do." Emily played that recording 3 times, taking careful notes. "This is gold," she said finally. "Not only does this prove intent to defraud, but it also implicates their attorney in potentially unethical conduct. Robert Mitchell could face disbarment for this. So we have enough? We have enough to bury them." She looked at me with something like admiration. "Karen, those recordings, you may have just saved yourself. I was just trying to understand what they were saying to me. I never thought. Sometimes the simplest actions have the biggest consequences." She started gathering the papers on her desk. "Now we need to prepare for trial, and I need you to do something else." "What?" "I need you to think about what you want to happen after we win. Because we are going to win, Karen. The question is, what do you want your legacy to be?" I thought about that question for days. What did I want? I didn't want revenge. That wasn't in my nature. I didn't want to see my son in prison, despite everything he had done. He was still my boy, somewhere deep down. The child I had nursed and rocked and loved with everything I had, but I also couldn't let him take what was mine, what my parents had left me, what I had worked my whole life to maintain. And more than anything, I didn't want to spend my remaining years fighting. I was 63 years old. I was tired. I wanted peace. So I made a decision. I called Emily and told her I wanted to sell 9 of my 15 acres, not to developers through Patrick, to buyers of my own choosing, at a fair price, on my own terms. Emily was surprised but supportive. She helped me find a reputable development company that wanted to build affordable family homes, not luxury condos, not strip malls, real homes for real families. The negotiation took 2 weeks. When it was done, I had a check for $3.2 million deposited in my own bank account, in my name alone, with Emily as witness. That money was mine, legally earned, fairly negotiated. It represented my freedom. I was no longer a poor farm woman they could push around. I was no longer dependent on anyone. The remaining 6 acres, including my house, my garden, and the grove where my parents and Thomas were buried, I decided to donate, not to Patrick, to the Millbrook Farming Cooperative. It was a small organization led by a young man named Daniel Foster. They taught sustainable agriculture to young people who wanted to learn traditional farming methods. Daniel had approached me about using part of my land for educational purposes years ago, but I had never followed through. Now seemed like the right time. The donation would become official after the trial. My house would become a teaching center. My fields would train the next generation of farmers. My legacy would continue, but in the hands of people who actually valued the land. Patrick and Olivia had no idea. They were about to walk into that courtroom and fight tooth and nail for property that had already been disposed of. A few nights before the trial, something unexpected happened. I was sitting on my porch watching the sunset when my phone buzzed. A missed call from an unknown number. Then another, and another. 3 calls in 10 minutes, all from the same number. No voicemail. I didn't think much of it until Emily mentioned something during our final preparation meeting. "There's something strange in Patrick's phone records," she said. "Over the past few weeks, he's made several calls to your home number late at night, but he never left messages and the calls only lasted a few seconds." "That was him? I thought it was telemarketers." Emily shook her head slowly. "I don't think so. I think he's been trying to reach you, maybe losing his nerve at the last second." I sat with that information for a long time. Patrick calling me in the middle of the night, hanging up before I could answer. What was he trying to say? Was there still something human left in him, some part that felt guilty for what he was doing? Or was it just more manipulation? I didn't know, and I couldn't afford to care. Not now, not with everything at stake. The trial was in 2 days. Whatever Patrick was feeling, whatever conflict was happening inside him, it was too late for second thoughts. He had made his choice when he filed that petition. Now he would have to live with the consequences. The morning of the trial, I woke before dawn. I took a long bath, trying to calm my nerves. I put on my cream-colored dress, the same one I had worn to Patrick's wedding. I pulled my hair back in a simple bun. I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw a woman who had worked hard her whole life. A woman who had loved and sacrificed and never asked for anything in return. A woman who had been betrayed by her own blood. But I also saw something else. Strength. I had survived losing my husband. I had survived raising a child alone. I had survived poverty and hardship and loneliness. I would survive this too. Emily picked me up at 7. We drove to the courthouse in silence, both of us lost in our thoughts. The building loomed ahead, gray and imposing against the morning sky. This was it. Everything I had worked for, everything I had prepared, came down to what happened in the next few hours. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the car. Whatever happened in that courtroom, I was ready. The courthouse hallway smelled of floor polish and old coffee. Emily and I found a wooden bench near courtroom 3 and sat down to wait. She reviewed her documents one last time, her lips moving silently as she rehearsed her arguments. I just sat there, my hands folded in my lap, watching people pass by. Lawyers in expensive suits hurried past, their leather shoes clicking against the marble. Families huddled together, speaking in worried whispers. Security guards stood at their posts, their faces bored from seeing too much human drama every single day. And then I saw them. Patrick and Olivia walked into the courthouse like they owned the place. He was wearing a black suit that probably cost more than I earned in 6 months of selling vegetables at the farmer's market. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. His hair was perfectly styled, not a strand out of place. Olivia was beside him in a beige designer pantsuit, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Her blonde hair was pulled back in an elegant twist. Diamond earrings caught the light every time she moved her head. Behind them came Robert Mitchell, their lawyer. Silver hair perfectly combed. Leather briefcase that probably cost more than my old truck. The confidence of a man who had never lost a case he cared about winning. They saw me. For a moment, Patrick's eyes met mine. Something flickered there. Discomfort, maybe, or the ghost of guilt. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared when Olivia whispered something in his ear. He smiled. That smile I knew so well. The same smile he used as a little boy when he'd done something wrong and was trying to charm his way out of trouble. Only now there was no warmth in it, no love, just cold calculation. They walked toward us and stopped a few feet away. They didn't greet us, didn't say good morning, just stood there, looking down at me with contempt they no longer bothered to hide. "You still have time to avoid this circus, Mom," Patrick said. His voice was cold, professional, like he was addressing a stranger. "Sign the papers. Admit you need help managing your affairs. We can make this all go away." Olivia nodded, adjusting her designer glasses. "It's really for the best, Karen. At your age, you shouldn't be worrying about property values and legal documents. Let the professionals handle things. We only want what's best for you." Her tone was so condescending, so dripping with false concern, that I felt anger rise in my chest like hot water coming to a boil. Robert Mitchell stepped forward, his smile smooth as butter. "Mrs. Brown, I strongly advise you to reconsider your position. We have extensive documentation supporting our case. Medical evaluations, witness testimonies, financial analyses. This case is effectively decided before it begins. Save yourself the public humiliation and accept the settlement we've offered." Emily stood up, positioning herself between me and them. "Medical evaluations conducted without examining my client, witness testimonies purchased with cash, financial analyses that somehow failed to mention your client's own impending bankruptcy." Her voice was calm but sharp as a blade. "Your case is built on smoke and mirrors, counselor, and that's going to become very clear very soon." Robert Mitchell's smile tightened. "You're young, Counselor Carter. You still lack experience with cases of this complexity. The law favors those who can demonstrate proper financial management capability, and I assure you, my clients are far more qualified than—" He paused, looking me up and down with obvious disdain. "An elderly farm woman living alone in the middle of nowhere." The way he said elderly farm woman made my fists clench. It wasn't just an insult to me. It was an insult to every woman who had ever worked the land with her own two hands. Every woman who had built something real and lasting through honest labor, while men like him shuffled papers in air-conditioned offices. But before I could respond, Olivia leaned in closer. Her voice dropped low, meant only for my ears, though Emily could hear every word. "There's something else you should understand, Karen. That penthouse where Patrick and I live, the $2 million one?" She smiled, showing perfect white teeth. "Your signature is on the mortgage as co-signer, which means if we can't make the payments, and things have been a little tight lately, the bank comes after you. You're already legally responsible for our debt." She straightened up, smoothing her jacket. "So you see, it's all connected. You're already tied to us financially. It would be so much simpler if you just cooperated." She thought she had me cornered. She thought that revelation would make me panic, make me crumble, make me sign whatever they put in front of me, just to make it all stop. What Olivia didn't know was that I already knew about that forged signature, and I had proof that I had never signed those documents. I said nothing. I just looked at her with steady eyes, and something in my expression must have unsettled her, because her smile faltered for just a moment. Then Patrick lost whatever composure he had left. He stepped forward, his face reddening, his voice rising loud enough for everyone in the hallway to hear. "Yeah, you planting corn and beans in the middle of nowhere while my wife and I get the $2 million penthouse. All fair and square, right, Mom?" His laughter was ugly, cruel, rehearsed to cause maximum humiliation. "You know what's really funny?" he continued, his voice getting louder. "You're going to be left with your pathetic little patch of dirt, your poor people's vegetables, while we enjoy the life we actually deserve, the life I earned. Because I actually went to college. I actually made something of myself. I'm actually worth something in this world." Olivia joined his laughter, covering her mouth with her perfectly manicured hand but not really hiding anything. Her eyes glittered with malice as she looked at me. Robert Mitchell smiled too, checking his documents with the self-assurance of a man who had already counted his victory. Other people in the hallway turned to stare, some with curiosity, some with pity. A young woman with a baby in her arms looked at me with such compassion that I had to look away before the tears came. I felt the heat of shame crawl up my neck and burn my cheeks. I felt my eyes sting with tears I refused to let fall. But I did not look away. I did not crumble. I did not give them the satisfaction. Emily was furious. I could see her hands balled into fists, her jaw tight, ready to unleash something fierce. But I put my hand on her arm and shook my head gently. "Let them," I whispered. "They'll get their answer inside." She took a deep breath and nodded, understanding my strategy. Patrick was still laughing, wiping fake tears from his eyes. "Oh, Mom, you should see your face right now. It's the same face you made when I asked for money for school trips, and you had to sell your chickens to pay for it. Always so dramatic, always playing the martyr. But guess what? Those days are over. Now it's my turn to take what I'm owed." Olivia hung on his arm, posing like they were in some society magazine. "We eat at restaurants where the cheapest appetizer costs more than you make in a week. We vacation in places you've never even heard of. And you're still living in that shack with no decent plumbing, no internet, no nothing. And you still dare to deny us what's rightfully ours?" A court officer appeared at the door of courtroom 3. "Case of Patrick Brown versus Karen Brown. Please come inside." Patrick straightened his tie and smirked at me one last time. "Showtime, Mom. Try not to embarrass yourself too much." They walked into the courtroom like conquering heroes. I stood slowly, smoothed my dress, and followed them in. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Cream-colored walls, fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly overhead. At the front, raised on a wooden platform, was Judge William Hayes's bench. On either side were tables for the opposing parties. Behind us, a few rows of benches for spectators, mostly empty except for 3 people I didn't recognize, probably law students or regular courthouse observers. Emily guided me to our table on the left. She arranged our documents with military precision, every folder in its place, every piece of evidence numbered and ready. Patrick and Olivia took their seats at the opposite table. Robert Mitchell sat between them, already spreading out his papers with the confidence of a man who had done this 1,000 times before. "All rise," the officer announced. We stood as Judge William Hayes entered through a side door. He was a man in his late 50s with gray hair combed back severely from his forehead. Reading glasses hung from a chain around his neck. His face was weathered and unreadable. The face of a man who had seen every kind of human failing and was no longer surprised by any of it. He sat in his chair, arranged some papers in front of him, and finally looked up at all of us with sharp, assessing eyes. "You may be seated." We sat. The room was silent except for the buzzing of the lights and the distant sound of footsteps in the hallway outside. Judge Hayes reviewed the file for several minutes. The silence stretched out, heavy and uncomfortable. I could feel Patrick shifting restlessly in his seat across the room. Finally, the judge removed his glasses and looked directly at Patrick. "Mr. Brown, you are petitioning for legal guardianship of your mother, Mrs. Karen Brown, on the grounds of mental incompetence to manage her assets." His voice was grave, measured. "That is a serious accusation. A very serious accusation. I trust you have solid evidence to support such a claim." Robert Mitchell stood immediately, buttoning his jacket with practiced ease. "Yes, Your Honor. We have extensive documentation proving that my client is far better equipped to manage the family estate than his mother." He paused for effect. "Mrs. Brown, with all due respect, is a 63-year-old woman with only a basic education, no financial training whatsoever, who lives in what can only be described as primitive conditions despite owning assets valued at several $1,000,000. This clearly demonstrates an inability to make appropriate decisions regarding her own welfare." Judge Hayes raised an eyebrow. "Is living humbly synonymous with mental incompetence, Counselor?" Robert Mitchell faltered for just a second, then recovered smoothly. "Not in itself, Your Honor. But choosing to live in unnecessary poverty when one possesses sufficient resources to live comfortably suggests a significant lack of judgment. Furthermore, my client has a college education, extensive business experience, and a proven track record of responsible financial management. He and his wife, who is also an attorney, are clearly in a better position to preserve and grow the family estate for future generations." Judge Hayes nodded slowly, his expression giving nothing away. "I see. And what does the defense have to say?" Emily stood, her voice clear and steady. "Your Honor, my client is a perfectly capable, fully lucid woman in complete possession of her mental faculties. She has successfully managed her property for over 4 decades without any problems whatsoever. The fact that she chooses to live simply, in the home where she raised her son and buried her husband, is a personal decision based on deeply held values, not evidence of incompetence. There is not a single credible piece of evidence suggesting otherwise. Judge Hayes waved his hand. We will proceed with the examination of evidence. Counselor Mitchell, present your case. Robert Mitchell smiled slightly, savoring his moment. He walked slowly in front of the judge's bench, his movements theatrical, calculated for maximum effect. Your Honor, this case is really quite straightforward. My client, Mr. Patrick Brown, is simply a devoted son concerned for the well-being of his elderly mother. For years, he has watched helplessly as she refuses to improve her quality of life, despite having ample means to do so. She lives without basic modern amenities. She refuses professional medical care. She refuses financial advice from qualified experts. And most concerning of all, she has begun exhibiting erratic behaviors that strongly suggest cognitive decline. Emily started to rise, but Judge Hayes held up his hand. What kind of erratic behaviors, Counselor? Robert Mitchell pulled a folder from his briefcase with a flourish. We have a sworn statement from Mrs. Dorothy Wallace, a neighbor of Mrs. Brown for over 30 years, who testifies that she has witnessed Mrs. Brown wandering her fields at odd hours, talking to herself and appearing confused and disoriented on multiple occasions. He handed copies to the judge and to Emily. We also have a sworn statement from Mr. James Cooper, proprietor of Cooper's General Store, who testifies that Mrs. Brown has visited his establishment multiple times appearing confused, forgetting what items she came to purchase, and having difficulty counting change. Another document passed to the judge. And finally, Your Honor, we present a psychological evaluation conducted by Dr. Gregory Palmer, a board-certified clinical psychiatrist with over 20 years of experience. After thorough consultation with family members close to Mrs. Brown, Dr. Palmer concludes that she exhibits signs consistent with mild cognitive impairment, likely early-stage dementia. He placed the final document on the judge's bench with an air of triumph. Judge Hayes examined the papers carefully, his reading glasses now perched on his nose. After a long moment, he looked up. This psychological evaluation, it was conducted without directly examining Mrs. Brown? Your Honor, in cases where the patient refuses evaluation, it is accepted practice to conduct assessments based on detailed testimony from close family members and regular acquaintances. Dr. Palmer followed all appropriate protocols. Judge Hayes didn't look convinced, but he gestured for Robert Mitchell to continue. In summary, Your Honor, we have clear documentation of cognitive decline, corroborating witness testimony, and professional medical opinion, all supporting the same conclusion. Mrs. Karen Brown requires assistance managing her substantial assets. My client is prepared to provide that assistance, ensuring his mother receives proper care while preserving the family estate for future generations. He returned to his seat with the satisfied air of a man who had just delivered a knockout punch. Judge Hayes turned to Emily. Does the defense wish to cross-examine? Emily stood slowly, deliberately. Yes, Your Honor, I do. She walked toward Patrick, stopping just a few feet from where he sat. Mr. Brown, when was the last time you visited your mother before initiating this legal proceeding? Patrick blinked, clearly not expecting that question. He glanced at Robert Mitchell, but the lawyer couldn't answer for him. I visit my mother regularly. Regularly. Can you be more specific? Patrick shifted in his seat. Well, with my work schedule, it's difficult to find time, but I try to— Mr. Brown, answer the question, please. When was the last time you visited your mother before filing this petition? His face reddened. About 3 months before. 3 months? And before that? I don't know. Maybe 6 months. Emily walked back to our table and picked up a document. Your Honor, I have here the complete phone records between Mr. Patrick Brown and his mother for the past 12 months. She handed copies to the judge and to Robert Mitchell. In total, there were 18 calls, all of them lasting less than 5 minutes, and every single one was initiated by Mrs. Brown, not by her supposedly concerned son. She let that sink in before continuing. Does this strike the court as the behavior of a son genuinely concerned about his mother's well-being? Or does it suggest someone who only became interested in his mother when he discovered her property was worth $5 million? Patrick's jaw tightened. I have a demanding career. That doesn't mean I don't care. Speaking of your career, Mr. Brown, Emily picked up another document. You and your wife currently reside in a penthouse condominium in Nashville valued at approximately $2 million. Is that correct? Yes. And how did you finance that purchase? Patrick hesitated. With a mortgage. A mortgage that you are currently 3 months behind on paying. A mortgage that is, in fact, on the verge of default. A mortgage that, if foreclosed, would result in the complete loss of your home. Robert Mitchell shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. My client's personal financial situation is completely irrelevant to this case. Emily turned to the judge. On the contrary, Your Honor, it is entirely relevant. We are attempting to establish the true motive behind this lawsuit, which is not concern for Mrs. Brown's welfare, but desperation to seize her assets in order to save the petitioner from his own financial ruin. Judge Hayes considered this for a moment. I'll allow the line of questioning. Mr. Brown, answer the question. Patrick's composure was cracking. I could see sweat beginning to form on his forehead. We've had some temporary financial difficulties, but nothing we can't resolve. Temporary difficulties? According to bank records, you are 3 payments behind, totaling over $47,000. Your property is scheduled for foreclosure auction in 60 days. Emily paused. That is why you suddenly need your mother's $5 million property, isn't it, Mr. Brown? Not because you care about her health, because you're about to lose everything. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Patrick opened his mouth, but no words came out. Olivia put her hand on his arm, her face pale. Robert Mitchell tried to recover. Your Honor, my client's personal financial challenges do not diminish his legitimate concern for his mother's. Legitimate concern? Emily cut in. Your Honor, I have evidence that suggests this case is anything but legitimate. She returned to our table and picked up a thick folder. I would like to present Exhibit A. This is the mortgage agreement for the petitioner's penthouse property. She handed copies to the judge. Please direct your attention to page 7, the cosigner section. Judge Hayes flipped to the page, his brow furrowing. Listed as cosigner on this $2 million mortgage is Karen Louise Brown, my client. Emily paused. Except my client never signed this document. She was never informed of this financial obligation. She never gave her consent to be a cosigner. The mood in the courtroom shifted instantly. Judge Hayes leaned forward. Robert Mitchell's face went white. Patrick and Olivia exchanged panicked glances. Are you alleging forgery, Counselor? Judge Hayes asked. I am not merely alleging it, Your Honor. I am presenting proof. Emily pulled out another document. This is the analysis from a certified forensic handwriting expert who compared my client's authentic signature from verified documents with the signature appearing on this mortgage agreement. The differences are conclusive. The slant of the letters, the pressure patterns, the spacing between the characters. The signature on this mortgage is a forgery. She handed the expert analysis to the judge. Olivia Brown, the petitioner's wife, is a licensed attorney with extensive knowledge of legal documents and financial instruments. She used that knowledge to forge my client's signature, adding her as a cosigner without her knowledge or consent, thereby making my client legally liable for a $2 million debt she knew nothing about. Judge Hayes studied the documents, his expression growing darker by the second. This is very serious, Counselor Mitchell. Does your client have an explanation? Robert Mitchell was sweating now, flipping frantically through his papers. Your Honor, we were not aware. My clients assured me that Mrs. Brown had given verbal consent to— Verbal consent? Judge Hayes's voice was sharp. For a $2 million loan guarantee? Are you suggesting a bank-accepted verbal consent for an obligation of this magnitude? Your Honor, I was not personally present for that transaction. I cannot speak to— What about your client? The judge turned to Olivia, his eyes hard. Mrs. Brown, you are an attorney. You understand perfectly well that a cosigner agreement requires proper documentation and informed consent. Would you care to explain this? Olivia stood slowly, her earlier confidence completely gone. Her hands were trembling. My mother-in-law agreed to help us. She wanted to help. Perhaps there was some administrative error at the bank when processing the paperwork. An administrative error that just happened to benefit you. Judge Hayes's voice was ice. An error that made your mother-in-law liable for your debt without her knowledge. Olivia had no answer. She sat down heavily, avoiding everyone's eyes. Emily seized the moment. Your Honor, there is more. Much more. She picked up a small digital recorder from our table. With the court's permission, I would like to play an audio recording. Judge Hayes nodded. Proceed. Emily pressed play. The courtroom fell absolutely silent. First there was background noise, dishes clinking, water running. My kitchen. Then Olivia's voice, clear and sharp, thinking I had gone to another room. Once we have power of attorney, we'll put your mother in a cheap nursing home and sell everything. With $5 million, we can pay off the mortgage, buy another penthouse in a better location, and still have plenty left over to invest. A pause. Then Patrick's voice. My mother already lived her life. Now it's our turn to enjoy. The words hung in the air like poison. Judge Hayes removed his glasses and stared at Patrick and Olivia with an expression of pure disgust. The three observers in the back of the room whispered to each other. Robert Mitchell closed his eyes and slowly shook his head, realizing his case had just collapsed. Emily stopped the recording. This conversation took place 4 months ago in my client's home, during a visit that was supposedly to check on her well-being. Judge Hayes leaned back in his chair. Do you have anything to say to that, Mr. Brown? Patrick's voice came out strangled. That was taken out of context. We were just... Context? The judge's voice cracked like a whip. In what possible context is planning to imprison your mother in a substandard facility against her will in order to steal her property acceptable? Patrick had no answer. Emily pressed play again. This time it was Patrick's voice on a phone call. Robert, I need you to find a legal way to declare my mother incompetent. I don't care how. Make up testimonies. Get a doctor who'll sign whatever is necessary. I'll pay you whatever you ask, but I need that land now. Robert Mitchell's voice replied, Patrick, that's ethically questionable. Don't give me ethics. Do you want the case or not? Because I have other lawyers waiting in line. A sigh. Then, all right, I'll see what I can do. The recording ended. Robert Mitchell was on his feet, his face red. Your Honor, that recording, I need to verify. Counselor Mitchell. Judge Hayes's voice was cold as winter. You are hereby suspended from this case, effective immediately. Furthermore, I will be forwarding this evidence to the State Bar Association for a full investigation into your professional conduct. Your Honor, please, I don't want to hear another word from you. Remove yourself from this courtroom. Now. Robert Mitchell gathered his papers with shaking hands. He gave Patrick and Olivia one last look, a mixture of fury and betrayal, then walked quickly out of the room. The door closed behind him with a heavy thud. Patrick and Olivia sat alone at their table now. No lawyer, no defense. Just the two of them facing the consequences of everything they had done. Emily wasn't finished. Your Honor, there is one final matter. She presented another set of documents to the judge. The petitioner has argued that his mother is incapable of managing her substantial assets. However, over the past several weeks, Mrs. Karen Brown has demonstrated exactly the opposite. She paused, and I saw Patrick lean forward, confusion on his face. My client has independently sold 9 of her 15 acres to a reputable development company for $3.2 million. The transaction was entirely legal, conducted at fair market value, with all proceeds deposited into an account solely in her name. Patrick shot to his feet. What? She can't do that. Mr. Brown, sit down, Judge Hayes commanded. But that's my inheritance. She had no right to... Mr. Brown, sit down, now. Patrick collapsed back into his chair, his face white with shock. Emily continued calmly. Furthermore, Mrs. Brown has arranged to donate the remaining 6 acres, including her home and family burial plot, to the Millbrook Farming Cooperative, a nonprofit organization dedicated to teaching sustainable agriculture to young people. The donation becomes effective upon the conclusion of these proceedings. She placed the final documents before the judge. My client is not an incompetent woman who needs to be saved from herself. She is a sharp, capable individual who has taken deliberate steps to secure her financial future and ensure her legacy continues in a meaningful way. She has done all of this while her own son was trying to have her declared mentally unfit. Olivia screamed from her seat. This is fraud. She hid assets. Mrs. Brown. Judge Hayes' voice silenced her instantly. Your mother-in-law's property was never your asset to claim. She had every legal right to dispose of it as she saw fit. There was no guardianship in place. She was and is fully competent to make her own decisions. He paused, letting his words sink in. Unlike, it seems, the two of you. Judge Hayes picked up his gavel. I have seen enough. I am prepared to issue my ruling." The room went completely still. In the case of Patrick Brown versus Karen Brown, this court finds entirely in favor of the defendant. The gavel struck with a sound like thunder. The petition for legal guardianship is denied in its entirety. Mrs. Karen Brown is declared fully competent to manage her own affairs. Another strike. Furthermore, I am ordering a criminal investigation to be opened by the District Attorney's Office for forgery and attempted fraud against both Patrick Brown and Olivia Brown. Olivia let out a choked sob. The fraudulent cosigner agreement is hereby declared null and void. Mrs. Karen Brown has no legal obligation whatsoever toward the petitioner's mortgage debt. Judge Hayes set down his gavel and looked directly at my son. "Mr. Brown, in my 25 years on this bench, this is one of the most despicable cases I have ever presided over. You attempted to strip your own mother, the woman who sacrificed everything to raise you, of her property, her dignity, and her freedom. You forged documents. You purchased false testimony. You manipulated the legal system as a weapon against someone who never did anything but love you." Patrick was crying now, real tears streaming down his face. "I hope you understand the gravity of what you have done. Not just legally, but morally. You will have to live with this for the rest of your life." He turned to me and his expression softened. "Mrs. Brown, I am deeply sorry for what you have been forced to endure. No mother should ever have to face what you have faced. You have conducted yourself with dignity and grace throughout these proceedings, and this court commends you for your strength." He stood, signaling the session was over. "Court is adjourned." As soon as the judge left, Patrick and Olivia turned on each other. "This is your fault," Patrick shouted, his voice cracking. "Your stupid plan. Your idea to forge her signature." "My fault?" Olivia shrieked back. "You're the one who wanted the money. You're the one who pushed for this lawsuit. You said it would be easy. You said she was just a stupid old woman who would never fight back. Don't you dare blame me for this. You're the one who couldn't even visit your own mother without me forcing you to." They screamed at each other right there in the courtroom, in front of the observers, in front of the court officers, in front of me. All the polished veneer stripped away, revealing the ugliness underneath. A court officer stepped forward. "You need to leave, now, before the judge holds you both in contempt." Patrick turned to look at me one last time. His face was red and swollen from crying. His expensive suit was rumpled, his perfect hair disheveled. For just a moment I saw the little boy I had raised, the child who had crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, the teenager who had hugged me at his high school graduation and whispered, "I love you, Mom," in my ear. But that boy was gone now, buried under years of greed and selfishness and choices I couldn't understand. Patrick opened his mouth as if to say something, but nothing came out. What could he possibly say? The officer escorted them out. Olivia's heels clicked frantically against the floor as she hurried away. Patrick walked slowly, his shoulders slumped, a broken man. The door closed behind them. And just like that, it was over. Emily drove me home that afternoon. We didn't talk much. There wasn't much to say. She had done everything she promised and more. We had won completely, totally, devastatingly. But as I watched the fields pass by outside the window, I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. I had saved my land. I had protected my dignity. I had exposed my son and daughter-in-law for what they truly were. But I had also lost my son. Maybe I had lost him years ago and just hadn't been willing to see it. But now there was no denying it anymore. The boy I raised was gone. A year passed. The criminal investigation moved forward. Patrick and Olivia faced charges for forgery and attempted fraud. In the end, they pleaded guilty to lesser charges. Probation, community service, heavy fines, no prison time, which was fine with me. I had never wanted my son behind bars. I just wanted him to face the truth of what he had become. Their penthouse was foreclosed. The bank took everything. Olivia filed for divorce 3 months after the trial, citing irreconcilable differences. She moved back to wherever she had come from, disappearing from Patrick's life as quickly as she had entered it. Patrick lost his job. No company wanted to be associated with someone under criminal investigation. Last I heard, he had moved to another state, working some small job, living in a tiny apartment, trying to rebuild from nothing. The Millbrook Farming Cooperative took over the 6 acres I had donated. They named it the Karen Brown Agricultural Training Center. Daniel Foster brought groups of young people out every week to learn about sustainable farming, traditional techniques, seed preservation. My fields were full of life again, just not my life. I kept my house and my main garden. The money from the land sale was more than enough to last me the rest of my days. I donated some to the church, invested some with Emily's help, and kept the rest for whatever the future might bring. Life went on. I woke before dawn every morning like I always had. I tended my vegetables. I sang hymns while I worked. I sat on the porch every evening and watched the sun set over the hills. It was peaceful. It was quiet. It was lonely. Then, one morning about 13 months after the trial, I was watering my tomato plants when I heard footsteps on the gravel path. I looked up and saw a figure walking toward my house. A man, moving slowly, like he was afraid of what he might find. My heart stopped. It was Patrick. He looked different. Thinner. Older. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by simple jeans and a cotton shirt I recognized, one I had given him years ago for his birthday. He had dark circles under his eyes. His hair was longer, less perfectly styled. He stopped about 10 feet away from me, like he was afraid to come any closer. "Mom," his voice cracked on that single word. It was the first time in over a year that he had called me that. No sarcasm, no coldness, just Mom. I set down my watering can. I didn't move toward him. I waited. "I know I don't have any right to be here," he said quietly. "I know I don't deserve anything from you. Not your time. Not your forgiveness. Nothing." He took a shaky breath. "Olivia left me. You probably heard. I lost my job, lost the apartment, lost everything." He laughed bitterly. "Funny how everyone disappears when you don't have money anymore. All those friends, all those connections. Gone overnight." He looked at the ground. "I started seeing a therapist. Couldn't afford a good one, but there's a community clinic that offers free sessions. I've been going twice a week for 8 months now." He paused. "I'm starting to understand some things. About why I did what I did. About who I became." He finally looked up at me, and I saw tears in his eyes. "You sacrificed everything for me. Everything. And I repaid you by trying to steal from you, by humiliating you, by treating you like you were worthless." His voice broke. "I said you had already lived your life, like you were just waiting to die, like you didn't matter anymore." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I am so sorry, Mom. I am so, so sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know words can't undo what I did, but I needed you to hear it. I needed to look you in the eyes and tell you that I know I was wrong, that I was cruel, that I was evil." He stood there, waiting, not asking for anything, not expecting anything. I looked at my son, this broken man who had once been my whole world. "Did you come because you're truly sorry?" I asked quietly. "Or because you have no one else left?" He was silent for a long moment. "Maybe both," he admitted. "But I know that what I did was unforgivable. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking for anything. I needed you to know." I thought about all the years I had sacrificed, all the meals I had skipped, all the miles I had walked, all the love I had poured into this child who had grown up to betray me. I thought about the recordings, the cruel words, the laughter in the courthouse hallway. But I also thought about the little boy who had cried in my arms when his father died, the teenager who had worked so hard to make me proud, the young man who had hugged me at his wedding and told me he loved me. That boy was still in there somewhere, buried deep, damaged, but maybe not completely destroyed. "I will forgive you one day, Patrick," I said slowly, "because holding on to anger only hurts me. It's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die." I saw hope flicker in his eyes. "But," I continued, "forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean things can ever go back to the way they were. Too much has happened. Too much has been broken." He nodded, the hope dimming but not disappearing entirely. "I understand. If you want to be part of my life again, it has to be different this time. No expectations, no demands, just honesty and time. Lots of time." "I can do that," he whispered. "I can try." We stood there in silence for a long moment, Then, hesitantly, Patrick spoke again. Can I hug you? I didn't answer with words. I just opened my arms. He came forward slowly, like a child approaching something fragile. And then he was in my arms, crying against my shoulder like he had when he was a little boy scared of thunderstorms. I held him. I didn't promise anything. I didn't say everything would be okay. I just held my son while he cried. Some wounds take a lifetime to heal. Some never heal at all. But maybe, just maybe, this was a beginning. Patrick left that evening to catch his bus back to wherever he was living now. He didn't ask for money, didn't ask to stay, just hugged me one more time and promised to call. He did call, once a week at first, then twice. Simple conversations, nothing heavy. He told me about his job, his tiny apartment, his therapy sessions. I told him about my garden, the weather, the young people learning to farm on land that used to be mine. He visited again 3 months later, helped me fix a broken fence, ate dinner at my table like he used to when he was young, left before dark. It wasn't much. It was awkward and painful and nothing like before, but it was something. That night after he was gone, I sat on my porch under a sky full of stars. I thought about everything that had happened, about the betrayal and the trial and the victory that felt like loss, about the son I had raised and the man he had become, and the broken person now trying to find his way back. Patrick had mocked me for planting corn and beans. He had laughed at my simple life, my dirt roads, my calloused hands. But sitting there under those stars, I finally understood the truth. When you plant with love, with respect, with patience, the harvest always comes. Sometimes the harvest is food, sometimes it's money, and sometimes, the most important times, the harvest is dignity. I had planted seeds of love in my son for 18 years. I had watched those seeds get choked by weeds of greed and selfishness. I had watched the garden I had tended so carefully turn wild and ugly. But maybe, just maybe, not everything had died. Maybe somewhere under all that damage, one small seed still survived. I didn't know if Patrick would really change. I didn't know if our relationship would ever truly heal. Trust, once broken so completely, doesn't rebuild easily, but I had planted a new seed the day I let him hug me. And like any seed, only time would tell if it would grow. Tomorrow I would wake with the sun, like I always had. I would water my tomatoes and weed my garden and sing hymns while I worked. I would teach another class at the training center that bore my name, passing down knowledge my mother taught me and her mother taught her. I would live another day on my land, on my terms, with my dignity intact. That was enough. That was more than enough. Judge William Hayes had said something during the trial that stayed with me. He called what Patrick and Olivia did despicable. And it was. But he also said something else, something I didn't fully understand until much later. You will have to live with this for the rest of your life. He was talking to Patrick, but he could have been talking to all of us. We all have to live with the choices we make, the people we hurt, the love we give and the love we withhold. Patrick chose greed over family. He chose money over love, and he lost everything. I chose dignity over revenge. I chose to keep my heart open even when it had every reason to close. And I found peace. Not happiness, exactly. The wound is still too fresh for that. Maybe it always will be. But peace. The peace of knowing I did the right thing. The peace of knowing my legacy will continue through those young farmers learning to work the land. The peace of knowing that even when my own son tried to destroy me, I did not let him turn me into something bitter and hateful. Karen Brown might be just an old farm woman who plants corn and beans. But Karen Brown knows something her son had to lose everything to learn. Some things matter more than money. Some things can't be bought or sold or stolen. Some things you can only grow yourself, one patient day at a time, like dignity, like hope, like love.